Just your reaction. Where were you when you heard the news?
I was sitting in the living room reading a book. I got a message from a former teacher that said there's white smoke.
It was bound to happen. For years, the Catholic Church has been in denial, claiming that unity still reigned beneath the dome of St. Peter's, that debate was healthy, and that its leaders simply held different pastoral emphases. However, everyone knew the truth behind the scenes. The Church was not debating, it was dividing, and that division is no longer quiet. This morning, Cardinal Robert Sarah, the African lion and spiritual voice of the Church's traditional core, did the unthinkable. He mentioned names. In a public interview published in Le Figaro, he directly criticized Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, labeling him a symbol of the Church's slow surrender to the modern world, and accusing him of spiritual appeasement in the face of moral decay. This was the moment that shattered the illusion. The gloves are off. The battle for the Church's soul is no longer whispered in corridors or shrouded in theological ambiguities. It is being fought through headlines, sermons, statements, and counterstatements. And for the first time in decades, one high-ranking cardinal has openly challenged another, not over politics or power, but about truth itself. "We are called to be shepherds," Sarah said, "not a performer, not politicians. If we lead souls astray, we will face the consequences at the judgment seat." The words were sharp. The message behind them, however, was more direct. Cardinal Sarah believes Cardinal Tagle is endangering the faith itself by watering down doctrine to appease the world and weakening the Church's voice in order to gain temporary praise. And the Vatican is trembling. Insiders are already describing the fallout as worse than Amoris Laetitia, and the most direct public rebuke within the College of Cardinals in the last 50 years. Some call it courage, others exhibited recklessness. However, no one denies the meaning. The Vatican is now visibly and irreversibly divided. In this exposé, we'll go over exactly what Sarah said, how Tagle responded, what's going on inside the Vatican walls, and how millions of Catholics worldwide are being forced to choose between two radically different visions of the Church's future. Because when a cardinal exposes another by name, the debate is over. It is a declaration. As of today, there is no turning back. The headlines did not do the story justice. When Le Figaro published an exclusive interview with Cardinal Robert Sarah, most media outlets focused on one explosive sentence. Cardinal Tagle preaches compassion, but it is compassion without courage. And without truth, it is not charity, it is betrayal. However, what followed in the full transcript was more than a jab. It was a full-blown exposé, a calculated, detailed, and devastating critique of what Sarah refers to as a carefully marketed spiritual decline. Sarah didn't hold back from the start with her questions. When asked about the current state of evangelization in the Church, he immediately pivoted. "We cannot talk about evangelism without first defending the gospel itself. And today, many of those entrusted with this mission, including high-ranking cardinals, present a diluted version of Christ's message, one that comforts but does not convert." When the interviewer asked him to clarify who he meant, Sarah did the unthinkable. "Cardinal Tagle is not my enemy, but his leadership has caused significant confusion. His preference for emotion over substance has misled many. He is not proclaiming the full gospel. He's offering fragments dressed as mercy." It was the first time in decades that a cardinal had publicly criticized another living cardinal, particularly one still in high office in the Vatican. But Sarah was only getting started. He accused Tagle of moral absolutes are being pushed aside, particularly when it comes to same-sex unions and divorce, using ambiguous language in evangelization documents which leave too much to interpretation, prioritizing the global image over internal coherence. He speaks many languages fluently, but his performance does not reflect the truth. It does not require applause. But perhaps the most damning moment occurred when Sarah addressed the faithful directly during the interview. "To the ordinary Catholic who no longer acknowledges his Church, I say this: you are not insane. You're not alone. There are those of us who still believe in our Father's faith and refuse to give up sacred tradition for media attention. That single cue was shared thousands of times within hours. Sarah's statement became known as the shot heard around the church on blogs, forums, and even in mainstream journalism. Progressives were outraged. One Jesuit theologian called Sarah's remarks deeply inappropriate, accusing her of threatening the unity of the church for the sake of personal relevance. Another Vatican official told La Repubblica that Sarah's tone was alarmist and borderline schismatic. Others, particularly among the church's conservative base, described it as the speech they had been waiting for years. "Sarah didn't start this fight," a Nigerian priest tweeted, "but he may be the only one brave enough to end it." The criticism of Tagle did not strike many traditional Catholics as an attack. It seemed like a defense of clarity, a long-awaited honesty from a man who has spent his entire career prioritizing silence and prayer over ambition and spectacle. Even those who were unconcerned about church politics recognized the historical significance of the event. "This is no longer about theological nuance," stated one Vatican analyst. "This is about what Catholicism means in the 21st century, and Sarah just defined one half of that equation." But Sarah didn't just criticize Tagle's leadership. He also proposed an alternative. He concluded the interview with a request for a renewal. "The church must stop looking outside for validation. We must kneel. We must fast. We must return to the cross, not as a symbol, but as a commandment. Let us not be concerned about our small number. The apostles were few." The interview ended. The reaction didn't. Within hours, conservative bishops had reposted it. Tagle's defenders scrambled in response. Inside the Vatican, phones started ringing, but not with congratulations. Because when a cardinal defies centuries of unwritten code and names the man he believes is undermining the faith, it shakes the entire Vatican. It splits it. Behind the Vatican's marble facade, the mood has changed from silence to panic. Cardinal Sarah's interview did not just make headlines, it shook the Roman Curia to its core. Vatican officials, who had grown accustomed to coded language and gentle posturing, were now witnessing a full-fledged split between two of the church's most visible figures. And no one could claim that it was just a difference in tone. Within hours of publication, internal Vatican communications were inundated with phone calls, emails, and informal memos. Several dicastery heads reportedly called off scheduled meetings to discuss the fallout. According to one source inside the Secretariat of State, the atmosphere was unprecedented, with some staff whispering about the possibility of disciplinary censure for Cardinal Sarah. But there's a problem. Sarah's popularity is too strong to dismiss. According to one insider, the Vatican leadership is almost evenly split. Half of the people are urging Pope Leo XIV to remain silent and let the moment pass. The other half want him to publicly condemn Sarah in order to maintain institutional unity. "What Sarah did violates every unwritten rule of Vatican diplomacy," said one Curia official who requested anonymity. But if the Pope reprimands him, it may spark open rebellion among bishops who already feel abandoned by Rome's progressive drift. The tension has also spread to diplomatic missions overseas. A leaked internal memo from the Apostolic Nunciature in Poland expressed concern that Sarah's remarks would spark widespread traditionalist demonstrations in Central and Eastern Europe. Bishops' conferences in the United States are reportedly divided on whether to publicly support Tagle or to remain silent in order to avoid alienating their more conservative dioceses. Morale is deteriorating within Tagle's dicastery for evangelization. Two senior employees reportedly requested reassignment. One aide described the atmosphere as cold and volatile, with junior clergy openly debating whether Tagle's leadership had been compromised. "The sense is that we're waiting for something to break," the aide said. "Either Tagle resigns or Sarah is forced into exile. However, both cannot remain in this system. It's too far gone." Meanwhile, conservative cardinals and bishops from Africa, Latin America, and even Asia are privately supporting Sarah. An African cardinal reportedly told a colleague, "He said something many of us have been whispering for years. He spoke up for those who were silenced." The most shocking thing, however, is Pope Leo XIV's complete silence. Not one word, not a gesture, not even a subtle hint via Vatican press channels. This silence is no longer interpreted as neutral. It is being interpreted as fear or calculation. Some believe that the Pope is considering his options. Others claim he's buying time. However, many inside the Vatican now believe that something is happening behind closed doors. A reshuffle, a formal response, or even a quiet but permanent shift in the balance of power. Because Cardinal Sarah did not simply criticize a fellow cleric. He questioned the very ideological architecture of the modern church. In doing so, he has forced the Vatican to make a choice. Options include soft reform and progressive accommodation, or reverting to traditional practices. Whatever happens next, insiders agree on this. The old rules no longer apply. The Vatican is no longer a chessboard. It is a battlefield. He waited 48 hours. For 2 days, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle did not say anything. As headlines screamed his name, Cardinal Sarah's words echoed across pulpits and podcasts, and Vatican insiders whispered of resignations and revolt. Tagle remained silent. However, when he did speak, he did not shout. He did not need to. When Cardinal Tagle appeared at a previously scheduled event in Madrid, a global symposium on interfaith dialogue, he finally responded, not with anger, but with the weapon he has used so effectively for years: soft power. Standing in front of a crowd of Catholic educators and journalists, he began his remarks with a subtle but undeniable reference to the storm brewing in Rome. In times of conflict, we are tempted to raise our voices, but the Lord spoke not from a throne of judgment, but from the cross, in silence and love. The message was clear. Sarah might be loud, but I am righteous. Tagle never mentioned Sarah by name. He did not address any specific accusations. However, the speech that followed was peppered with layered rebukes, intended to reframe the conversation without getting his hands dirty. The church is not a fortress to be guarded. It is a home that needs to be opened. When we close the doors in fear of the world, we bury our faith, not preserve it. The audience applauded. The speech was published by Vatican News in less than an hour. Progressive bishops across Europe quickly reposted the clips, praising Tagle's grace under fire. But beneath the surface, the tone was anything but passive. Privately, sources say Tagle is enraged. Aides close to him reportedly drafted a confidential briefing for Pope Leo XIV, describing Sarah's comments as potentially schismatic rhetoric that may undermine ecclesial unity on a global scale. Some are even urging the Pope to publicly affirm Tagle's authority, if not to preserve his dignity, then to prevent Sarah's growing influence from further destabilizing the Church. Meanwhile, Vatican diplomats are struggling to handle the optics. Speaking with La Croix, a senior Vatican official admitted, if Tagle does not respond forcefully, he risks appearing weak, but if he attacks directly, he will confirm Sarah's claims. It's a lose-lose. However, the damage is already spreading. Tagle's refusal to directly respond to Sarah's criticisms, his insistence on metaphor, silence, and pastoral platitudes, has further alienated conservatives who see it as evasion rather than humility. He speaks of bridges, one African bishop observed, but what good is a bridge if the truth is drowned beneath it? Even in the dicastery for evangelization, where Tagle's leadership was once admired, there is growing confusion. Some employees are reportedly wondering if he will survive the next major reshuffle. He's still smiling, said an insider, but the ground beneath him is shaking. And then came the headline Tagle had feared the most. Tagle's silence backfires. Sarah's movement grows. Because while Tagle was preaching peace, Sarah's camp was planning rosary rallies, youth marches, supportive letters from clergy members. His words were transforming into a movement, and Tagle's poetic restraint was beginning to resemble retreat. The man once regarded as the church's future leader is now on the defensive, and whether his strategy is patience or paralysis, the reality is becoming clear. Sarah attacked, Tagle deflected. The faithful made a decision. In this war of words, inaction is no longer an option. It's a surrender. From parishes in Manila to cathedrals in Warsaw, from African seminaries to Gen Z Catholic YouTube channels, the Church is schisming right in front of our eyes. Cardinal Sarah's blistering expose, as well as Tagle's veiled response, did more than just stir the waters. They split them. What was once a quiet ideological schism has become a roaring divide, and Catholics around the world are taking sides. In Africa, the response has been swift and decisive. Bishops from Nigeria, Ghana, and Uganda have issued public statements defending Sarah, describing his words as necessary, prophetic, and a voice of clarity in a time of chaos. In Guinea, Sarah's homeland, masses have been held in his honor, and rosary rallies of thousands have formed across cities. A Guinean archbishop stated bluntly, "Cardinal Sarah speaks not only for Africa, he speaks for all Catholics who have seen the gospel softened into suggestion." Clergy across Eastern Europe, particularly in Poland and Hungary, have echoed this sentiment. Traditionalist parishes report increased attendance, and conservative Catholic politicians have begun citing Sarah's words in public. A Polish bishop went so far as to say, "The West might have forgotten who she is, but the East remembers." Meanwhile, in Western Europe, the mood is alarming and defensive. Progressive bishops in Germany, France, and Belgium are calling for unity and condemning Sarah's rhetoric as reckless populism. One German cardinal has warned, "The Church must avoid political polarization." Cardinal Sarah's words run the risk of tearing the fabric of the body of Christ. Even here, cracks are appearing. Traditional Latin Mass communities are expanding. Young Catholics are sharing clips of Sarah's interview on TikTok with captions such as, "Finally, someone said it." In North America, the schism runs through the heart of the Church. In the United States, some dioceses have quietly directed clergy not to address the Sarah Tagle controversy from the pulpit. Others are openly hosting forums and live streams to debate the very future of Catholicism. One lay Catholic influencer, whose YouTube channel has gained 40,000 subscribers in the last week, summarized the mood. "This isn't just about Sarah or Tagle. It is about a church that will either kneel before God or the world, and we have to make a choice." Latin America pays close attention. The region, long regarded as a liberal Catholic stronghold, is showing signs of surprise. Conservative priests in Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico have begun to quote Sarah in their homilies, some for the first time. Sarah's interview was cited as the founding inspiration for the youth-led rosary movement, Remnant 23 Inches in Chile. Meanwhile, Asian Catholics, particularly in the Philippines, find themselves torn. Tagle is still regarded as a national hero, loved and respected by many. But even there, cracks are appearing. A Filipino theology professor tweeted, "We adore Cardinal Tagle, but love does not imply silence. Sarah's questions deserve answers." The global pressure is also being felt inside the Vatican. Diplomats have begun issuing quiet warnings that the Church is on the verge of a cultural civil war, and the current leadership, including Pope Leo XIV, can no longer claim neutrality. If this continues, one Vatican ambassador reportedly warned, there may be no Catholic Church. We may have two expressions of faith that orbit the same doctrine but never meet, because this is more than just a difference in vision. It is a clash of convictions. And as rosary vigils meet resistance marches, and Sarah's sermons go viral while Tagle's statements dwindle, one thing is undeniably clear. The Vatican no longer leads a unified church. It is presiding over a global public fracture that is growing by the day. A strange current is emerging beneath the chaos, one of prophecy, symbolism, and silent expectation. For many of the faithful, it is no longer just about institutional politics. It gives me a biblical vibe. As Cardinal Sarah's words reverberate around the world, whispers of ancient prophecies and long-lost private revelations resurface in the Catholic imagination. Among them is one that has gone viral on traditionalist forums, initially traced back to an obscure 20th century mystic. When Rome trembles and truth is exchanged for peace, a lion will emerge from the land of the sun. He will not seek power, Rather, power will seek him. Sarah's followers have no doubt about who the lion is. The symbolism is striking. Sarah, the Guinean cardinal known for his silence, humility, and tenacity in defending doctrine, is now more than just a prelate. He is a symbol, a figure emerging from the margins to challenge the very heart of the Vatican. Online, he's known as the Lion of the Remnant, and youth-led pages dedicated to him have grown in size and influence. An Instagram post with over 200,000 likes reads, "He is not campaigning, he is praying. Nonetheless, the world listens." But the wave is more than just digital. From Krakow to Lagos, Sydney to Buenos Aires, traditionalist Catholic groups are holding all-night vigils, rosary processions, and Eucharistic adoration in Cardinal Sarah's honor. One group in Nairobi has started publishing a monthly pamphlet called Sarah Speaks, translating his words into Swahili and distributing them to parishes throughout East Africa. According to reports, Sarah's unofficial influence within the Vatican has surpassed that of some department heads. Cardinals who were previously hesitant to align with him are now requesting private audiences, eager to see which way the wind blows. Meanwhile, Cardinal Tagle, once regarded as papabile, is reportedly losing ground. His supporters are still loyal, but nervous. His critics are becoming more outspoken. One senior curial official commented, "Sarah is winning without the office. Tagle is shrinking alongside it. That explains everything." Nevertheless, Pope Leo XIV has said nothing. No endorsement. There was no correction. There's no guidance. For the faithful, the silence is symbolic. For some, this is a test. Others see it as a void waiting to be filled. But across continents and cultures, among the poor and powerful alike, one thing has become clear. The people have chosen a prophet. His name is Cardinal Robert Sarah. The era of quiet diplomacy is over. Cardinal Robert Sarah shattered the Vatican's fragile truce with a voice of conviction rather than rebellion. Sarah has crossed a line that few have dared to tread by directly naming Cardinal Tagle, challenging his leadership, and calling out what he sees as a betrayal of the Church's sacred mission. And now the whole Catholic world is watching. The reaction is already outpacing the event. Tagle's supporters are scrambling. Sarah's name is prayed during novenas, whispered in seminaries, and printed on banners. Lay people are organizing, bishops are making decisions, and curial staff are preparing for what many call a complete reshaping of the Church's power structure. But most telling of all, Pope Leo XIV still refuses to speak. His silence now appears intentional, calculated, maybe even strategic, but it's also dangerous. Because in the absence of clear leadership, the people have discovered their own voice, and it belongs to the cardinal who will not bend, flatter, or be silenced. When the shepherd refuses to speak, the sheep will follow the one who dares to cry out. Cardinal Sarah has cried out. The Church now stands on a precipice. Will it return to its fundamentals, tradition, clarity, and unwavering doctrine? Or will it keep drifting, guided by uncertain hands and softened truths? There is no more room for compromise in this conflict, and whether the Vatican admits it or not, the faithful already know a line has been crossed. What happens next may reshape Catholicism for a generation or split it in two.